Hello, everyone, and welcome again. Together with Prasanjit and Sambit, we are once again here to talk about all things SAP on Azure. Hello, Prasanjit. Hello, Sambit. How are you guys?
I'm good,
They're
Nish.
doing good.
Yeah, great. Did you guys have a good week so far?
Yes, it was an awesome weekend,
Yeah,
and starting of the week was also good.
yeah,
What
great
about
to.
you, Samit?
Yeah, all good, Prasanjit, from my side as well. Long weekend and yeah, starting as well. Good for me.
Awesome, guys. It's good to be talking to you guys again. We're looking forward to this next session. So, if you can recall, in the first episode, we spoke about migrations. In this episode, which is now episode 3, we are talking about the SAP Deployment Automation Framework, which is kind of like another option to deploy your SAP systems in Azure. So we, in the next 20 to 30 minutes, we would like to talk to you around what does this automation mean. Prasanjit, if you don't mind just sharing your slides, please.
Absolutely. So just to let me know, let me put it into your
Yeah.
slide mode. Yes, all is yours.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. I mean, before I hand over to Prasanjit to continue on the automation topic with SAP, I think we all agree, right? Smart homes, it seems to be a thing nowadays, right? A lot of people are looking for easy, flexible ways of managing, let's call it certain things in the house, right? So, for example, let's say just before I head home from work and on my way there, I want to maybe, I don't know, maybe just open the garage, okay? And I can actually do this directly from an app, right? Or maybe I want to switch on the air conditioner. I can do this via an app as well, right? There's so many things that you can start automating inside your house. It's just amazing, and all of these type of things are done just by simply making changes in the technology itself, right? So it's just making life a bit more simpler for us as people living in these homes, so that we don't have to go and manually do these things, right? So it's always reducing that manual element and trying to reduce those things and make it more simpler. I always believe in the simple things in life, and I believe that automation, and as you can see from here, automation is just making things much more simpler. With that in mind, let's now talk about how we can make life a bit more simpler when we start moving SAP workloads to Azure.
Perfect. You made a great start. So let's have a look that what it's all about SAP Deployment Automation Framework. As we can see in the picture that we like to things to be happen in this way. We don't need to monitor or administer everything in front of the actual things happening. And therefore, for running SAP workload on Azure, we gave a thought that if we can automate the existing SAP system migration or starting a greenfield SAP workload into Azure, how does that will look like, and how easy it would be for our customers and partners to implement or adopting this framework into their own tools or using it as is. It will be much easier, convenient, much flexible, agile, and most importantly, it will accommodate all the best practices and recommendation coming from both Microsoft and SAP. So let's take a look about the skeleton of this automation framework. So the automation framework that we have developed over the time, and it's when you say we, it's a community driven development. So Microsoft is one of the developer or the contributor, and then we also have partners who are helping us or contributing into this repository, making the world more smarter through this automation framework. So as a result, This automation toolset is free of charge. It has been hosted as an open source tool. It's available in the GitHub. So what we need to do as a first step is to copy the code or simply import the code into your local environment. And then depending on which Azure region you are going to deploy your workload, you just need to deploy the first set of resource deployment. And in the first set of resource deployment, we are considering um, a central place where the next part of the deployment will take place. And in the central place, we are calling it as control plane. This control plane will consist like Ubuntu VM, which would be the central place where all the other developers or the people who would be involving building the SAP landscape can access and do the work from there instead of doing it from individual workstation on the laptop. Then for a security standpoint, you probably need Azure Firewall, but that's not an essential component here. This could be optional depending on if you have an existing NVA or firewall in the Azure in your Azure tenant. As part of this control plane, we are also deploying two uh, mainly the storage account. So one storage account would be hosting your SAP softwares, and another storage account will mainly responsible for storing the state file. State file in the sense when you deploy um, any infrastructure or any resources into the cloud through Terraform, it produces a state file. It's kind of a register so that the next time you execute some update or you'd like to change some of the part of the deployment, it first reads through the register and understand that what has been deployed and what is the new change that it has to anticipate. So this is the thought behind it, that we should not lose the state file, which should be saved locally in the deployer VM rather than we store it in a central place. And that's the reason we create a storage account in your subscription, Azure subscription. And from there, you can refer in the future deployment that you're gonna do in your run phase or day one phase. Then the next one is the interesting one. So the right-hand part is mainly dealing with your SAP landscape. And here we are also splitting the task into two tasks. So one is deploying the workload zone, or where your network, your subnets would be sitting in. And then finally, you are deploying the actual SAP host, storage, and bunch of other resources which would be essential. We are not stopping there as well, because this automation framework is not only on the infrastructure layer. It also does the configuration, going inside the VM, doing all the necessary changes that are needed before you start installing SAP system. And again, beyond to that, we also build the capability to install your SAP application in a silent or unattended manner. So through this automation toolset, you have end-to-end experience, starting from the infrastructure deployment to configuring the infrastructure for the SAP installation, and finally doing the SAP installation altogether. So you will get a up and running SAP system after a couple of hours, depending on the scenario. So this is the full end-to-end picture, or how it will look like from development perspective in order to accommodate the SAP automation framework in your Azure landscape.
I have a
Then,
question,
yes,
Prasanjit,
please.
before you proceed. In terms of the installation of SAP, where does the SAP software sit in this picture?
That's a great question. So as we have already told that there are two storage accounts, and I will point out that we have one storage account called SAP Bits, and we have another storage account called TF State. So as the name suggests, SAP Bits is the container to host all of your SAP software that would be downloaded part of this execution. And of course, depending on which particular software stack you will install, we have a catalog. Some catalog we have already prepared, and there is also documentation on how to prepare a new bill of material for SAP component. Like if you have something else which is not listed in our default catalog, you can prepare yourself. And then the automation framework will download all the software which are needed for your SAP instance to be installed, and it will store those softwares into this SAP bits blob container.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask you another question, but I think you answered it. It was the bill of material. In case later on I want to
Yes.
install a later version, it'll be in the bill of material. Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much. That makes
I
sense.
will show in the hands-on demo that where it all exists and how you can leverage the existing one and prepare the new one guiding. I mean, you can get help from our documentation.
Good.
And the final piece of this automation framework is the integration with Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps is a very popular tool and widely used. So what we have thought that what we have already developed, if we can integrate with Azure DevOps, it will be very simple so that you can just create pipeline for different tasks. And then you don't need to keep watching your screen, just black and white, that how things are being progressed, right? So you just run it and you forget after a couple of minutes or hours, depending on which particular task you're executing, your job would be done. If the job is failed, then you also get a notification to your email with the detailed error. You can go back and check what was the error and then you apply the fix. So Azure DevOps, in a nutshell, it was kind of a turnkey solution so that it gives you the possibility to minimize your work time rather than you can focus on other stuff and utilizing the resource expertise into other areas, not only just for the infrastructure deployment or building the SAP landscape. So I think it was not mentioned in the beginning. I should have mentioned it. So this entire automation framework has been built on two popular technology. One is Terraform. The second one is Ansible. Terraform is mainly being used for the infrastructure deployment. So that means all the storage component, VM, and all the other necessary parts of Azure resources are being deployed to the Terraform. Ansible comes into picture when you do the configuration, software deployment, and SAP installation. So it does a couple of important tasks in our old SAP basis area. It does the operating system configuration, then it also helps you to download the software from SAP download marketplace, and finally it will help you to install the SAP system for the host. Now, what it actually provides the capability. So it can give you lots of capabilities. For example, it's now ready for HA architecture implementation. It also supports both high availability in zones and availability set. It provides you the proximity placement group pinning. It's also customized disk configuration. It supports the custom image. It can also support your own naming. So we understand that every organization has their own naming, and it supports all different sorts of naming. Disk encryption is also supported. We have support for the key vault. Important note here that we are actually utilizing key vault to store all the credentials. So we are not using the traditional username and password or the SSH. Yeah. So we are rather using the SSH key, and that will be stored in the key vault, and there will be no human interaction for configuring or installing the SAP system. In the DB we have support for HANA and AnyDB. In terms of AnyDB, we have support for Oracle at this moment. The DB2 also is in preview. We're also working with AC and MS SQL. Application tier, it's both Linux and Windows are supported. From Azure file share perspective or shared file perspective, Azure native file and Azure file share is supported. From SAP deployment mechanism, it supports three different scenarios: standalone, distributed, and distributed HA. I'm not going each and every line for the configuration installation, but it does everything which is necessary for an SAP system to install either in Linux or in Windows environment. So it takes all the tasks, or it takes care of all the tasks that are mandatory for installing an SAP system. So normally what we have seen for a standalone system installation, starting from zero to up and running system, it takes around 3 hours. If you do it, the HA and pacemaker also included. If it is single or standalone installation, that it will take approximately 2 hours. But of course, it depends on other factors like which bill of material you have chosen and what are the different components you have included into that. So we have, as we said, this has been a modularized approach we have taken. And in this automation framework, mainly there are three different deployment phases. So first phase is control plane. We discussed in the beginning that it actually does deploy a couple of resources in Azure. And that's not part of your SAP landscape, but is very essential because we need this environment to execute the successive deployments. And then we do the deployment of the SAP landscape. And finally, we do the deployment of the SAP system itself. So there are 3 steps before you get to see one SAP system up and running. And inside that, there are many subtasks, but we don't need to focus on much because everything would be taken care of while we integrate the SAP, the whole automation framework with Azure DevOps. So here you see in the picture, so we have control plane first that has to be deployed, and then it will become a self-hosted agent while utilizing Azure DevOps. The second part is workload zone. So it does deploy the network and subsequent resources. And the third one is the SAP system and other associated resources. Now, each deployment is predominantly centered around a configuration file, which you call a TF verse file. And that verse file, TF verse file, has many parameters. Some parameters are mandatory and few parameters are actually mandatory, and most of the parameters are optional. That gives you the possibility to customize your own environment. You can tweak a lot of stuff. You can infuse your own naming convention. And you can also do other stuff with all the additional parameters. And then it will persist everything in the control plane, or you can also utilize the source control from the Azure DevOps. I'll show everything in a demo. So this is typically how it looks like when you are using Azure DevOps. And you can see the configuration file, which is showing in the right-hand side. But let me take you to the demo part so that we can explain that how it's actually look like. Back. So here, you should go here. Now we have a repo called SAP Automation. And this is the code that I have sourced from this SAP Automation repository, which is hosted in the GitHub. So all you have to do, the cloning of this repository. And it does have a feature as well. So if you just go through this, for example, if you go to the repos, and then you get an option over here to import repo or clone repo. So you can, of course, from here, new repository. So once you click on new repository, or you can, of course, do the import repository. So you execute on that, and then you have to provide the link from the GitHub, and then you can provide a new name from here. So for me, it is SAP Automation. So once the code has been cloned or copied into your Azure DevOps workspace, then you have to also create a folder called workspace. And this is predominantly the container for all of your configuration. And this is mainly for the first for the control plane, then second for the landscape, and third is for the system. So the first thing first is you have to deploy the control plane, which is the deployer. And then all you need to do, for example, I have deployed one control plane in West Europe. And then if I go to the configuration file, maybe it's little smaller, but I will try to make it little large. And here we see that there are a bunch of parameters that I have passed. Some parameter I have passed as an existing one. So this is the reason I said that there are very minimal parameter that is needed when you build a new, but if you try to utilize your existing one, this is of course a possibility. And for that matter, you have to supply the existing IDs. For example, network, for example, if you have any other existing resource you would like to utilize, just utilize the parameters that are available as part of the optional parameters. So once you are done with the configuration, then there's another thing that you have to also check, and all you will find in the documentation which is available here. So we have everything documented that what you have to do. For example, when you click on SAP Deployment Automation in DevOps Hands-on Lab, there you will see all the instruction, how to set up the DevOps and what are the other things that you have to take care in order to deploy SAP system through Azure DevOps. Now this is the configuration file we have seen. And once the configuration file has been completed according to your specification, then you move over to the pipelines. And we have pipelines that are available in the source code. So you just need to import that pipeline. So this is the pipeline, the control plane for deploying the control plane. And if you just click on edit, so here, all the things that are already there, you don't need to code anything. You just need to import the code. As you see, it's coming from the Git repository, and we have a folder called pipeline, and then you just import depending on which name you would like to give, and then you just save it. So once you save it, then you have a possibility to run the code. So here you can run new, or you can start. If there is an error, you can start from there. So if you ran, I'm not going to run, but I can show you my earlier run. And here you see that I have executed the code. Since there are many resources that were existed already, so it took me around 4 minutes and 26 seconds. And I have the possibility to check all the logs, how it worked, and which are the resources being created, which are the resources are changed, everything I can see. So once the control plane has deployed, the second step of this is to do the landscape deployment. So that means the network and subnets and all the other network related resources for your SAP system. And here, for example, I was working on this one to deploy in my subscription. So I would provide this is a QoS system, then the location means the Azure region. Then we also have a network logical name because that we refer in the subsequent system deployment. Then you have to give a network address space, make sure there is no overlapping, and finally bunch of address space for the subnets, and make sure that they are unique within your own subscription. So this is all you need to provide. But as I said, if you would like to customize, there is a lot of optional parameter that you can fill in. So once that is done, then you just need to go to the pipeline and you can just execute the pipeline and it will pick up. For example, if I go back here and I see there is a SAP 01 infrastructure created, and it will just create all the NSG, subnets, VNet, private link. If I choose to have a private link created, then of course some other shared services like the file share, that will be also part of this deployment. And the last one is basically the system. So here, if we go back to the files, so again, in the system, go back to the configuration folder, in the system folder, and here you see that we have a system called Dev West Europe, and this was also executed a couple of days ago. And we see that we have to provide one parameter file. So this is the most important one. There are other couple of other files, for example, Sage for HANA, Sage for application. This is mainly to customize because I'm not using the default sizing that has been provided through the code. I can also have the opportunity to rename or utilize my own naming convention. So I just wanted to provide my own naming, and therefore this is the file which will override, and that is controlled by a parameter that I call name override file. And I have to give the name of the file where I put all the name of the resources. So once this is successful, if you go back to the pipelines, you will see the status. For example, this SAP system deployment. So this was successful. If you see the logs, and then we can see that all the infrastructure got deployed. It took around 9 minutes and 25 seconds. So it's very easy and convenient. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So what I can really see here, what's really cool for me, right, is that with this automation, you are reducing the amount of time that it would take to log on to the Azure portal, go and create those VMs, go and create those resource groups, go and create, I don't know, doing tagging or even the disks and all of these type of things, reducing the time and the amount of steps involved in doing that by using pipelines or by using this configuration tvars files that I see here, just by editing this. Another benefit is that this is a repeatable process in the automation, right? If you just want to go and deploy another another environment, you can just edit those files and maybe change a few things and then quickly deploy it. It's just that automation just makes a lot of sense, right? So that's how I see it as well.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So that's very important observation. Yes, so that's very repeatable. So that means if I need to deploy another system, it will take me a minute to deploy that system. For example, do we have 5 minutes with us?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Perfect. So I will just do another system deployment,
Hmm.
and all I need to do, and here I just wanted to highlight that I have cloned that same repository to my Visual Studio Code because it gives me a flexibility to edit and do the configuration changes quite quickly. So let me go to the system. I have already shown that I have deployed SAP 01x00. Let me see if I can deploy a new system, but with a different SID. So I just paste it over here, and then I rename it because I'm going to deploy a new system. So let's say it's become XD1, and I just save it. And then I will just remove my older logs because these files are not needed. And this is also not needed. So I just delete them. This time I don't wish to suppress the name. So keep it there, but I'm just going to uh, remove that parameter. So let's say I remove this one, and then it's still the environment is dev, the location is West Europe, the network logical name is SAP01, the database SID, let me change it. So it should be XDH, let's say. It's still on HANA, XDH, system demo, it's taking the custom HANA sizes, database dual links false. So all the other configuration, it's running on SUSE, but it doesn't matter. You can choose any other operating system that is supported by SAP. And then, of course, the SID is going to change. So it would be XD1. And yeah, that's the only change, and probably the bunch of tags that I have applied earlier that probably need to change. That's it. So I'm done with the changes. Yeah, no more changes required. So I just save it. And of course, I need to change the name as well. So I'll rename to make it aligned, XD1. And once I saved, then of course I need to add XD1 system config. I just commit it. So you will see it's reflecting over here. Let me go to the files, workspaces, system, and we see there is Okay, so let me refresh. Workspaces, system, and we should have the new one. Let me see if it is okay. I haven't synced it yet. Let me
Okay,
push it.
you need to sync it. Okay.
Yep. So once it's succeeding in the upload phase, then I will get it displayed over here.
Yep.
Yep, so that is committed. Now I'll refresh this. If we go workspace, system, and then I see XD1 is
XD1.
available.
Yeah, I
Yes.
see it then. Yes,
And
that's
here,
great.
all the configuration that I already checked. So I'm not going to do anything over there. All I need to do, I'll go to the pipeline. And then this time I'm deploying the SAP system. I'll click on this and run pipeline. And here I have to change that. What is the one? So XD1 that I have, I wanted to create a new system. I just click on run, then I will forget because it will automatically will pick up that how things will move. And then more probably it will take 9 to 10 minutes and then it will deploy the entire system. So that's pretty much in terms of demoing this. And you have already spotted that how flexible, easy, and repeatable it is. So I don't need to spend more than 5 minutes in order to deploy a new system.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's brilliant. I mean, we've seen already Terraform, Ansible, DevOps. Oh man, this is just amazing. So yeah, thank you very much. And thank you all for attending. Hopefully this has really added a lot of value for you, especially if you're thinking of implementing automation when it comes to deploying your SAP systems in Azure. Hope you've enjoyed episode 3 and we look forward to episode 4 coming soon. All the best and see you again soon. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.